Now, I know a lot of people are going to be talking about Marc Cucurella and his position, but actually this is the secret to why we won. Lads, lasses and the rest of the masses, welcome back to another tactical breakdown. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Chelsea-Tottenham match and diving into some of the hidden details that you might have missed. Let's go. Firstly, let's talk about the team's setup because there were two different formations that we used, one in the first half and one in the second, with the one in the first half being slightly worse than the one in the second half. Now, as this is an Enzo Maresca Chelsea side, we know that this 4-3-3 is not going to stay like this, and that in possession we are going to invert one of our fullbacks into the midfield to create a box midfield. Now, with this setup with Cucurella in the lineup and Caicedo playing as the right back, it's pretty obvious that Caicedo is going to be the one that comes into this midfield role, and that is exactly what happened. And we get to see Benoit Badiashile moving over to this right hand side with Colwill playing as a central centre back, and Cucurella playing as this centre back left back hybrid who has the license to get up, but for the most part will stay in this kind of defensive role. This allows Enzo and Palmer to play a bit higher, it allows Neto and Sancho to stay nice and wide, and Jackson to be up against the two centre-backs. Now, a lot of the time when we do this with this box midfield, we see the diamond happen. We see that Palmer goes into a more central 10 role. Whoever's on this right hand side, usually Malo Gusto, will go into a right centre mid role, with Enzo going to a left centre mid role, and then Romeo Lavia would come into a holding 6 role here on his own and try and progress us forward. But in this game, we didn't actually see that in the first half. In the first half, we actually played this midfield too of Caicedo and Lavia, who are a very good partnership in their own right, and we actually see Enzo and Palmer getting very, very high and allowed to use their creative attributes further up the pitch. Now, we're going to go quite in depth here for this particular match because it's such an important one, so if you enjoy these types of tactical deep dives, then perhaps consider subscribing to the channel. I do these videos regularly after every game, so if you don't want to miss any going forward, you know what to do. Now, we first need to understand what Spurs wanted to do, and then we can talk about how we were able to navigate it and use it to our advantage. Now, we know that Ange Postecoglou loves to deploy this aggressive, high line, high press style with his team pushing up to the halfway line as much as possible, but the way that his team does this is interesting, as it's rather similar to how we set up as well. 5 players staying back and 5 players going forward. What this essentially means is that we are forced into this 5v5 in our first third, and now the game becomes a matter of whether we can win the individual battles and retain the ball under this immense pressure. And we see this work for Spurs early on in the game, with them able to push the ball out to Benoit Badiashile on this right hand side and make him uncomfortable. Obviously, he's a natural left footer, so playing it down the line is not his natural instinct. He wants to go inside, and though he's able to do this a few times during the game and kind of break the line this way going into Caicedo, for the most part he found this really, really hard with Son pressing him with this curve and going this way and forcing him onto his right foot that he wasn't very comfortable with. Now, this pressure led to a lot of turnovers. We saw this in the first minute of the game, with Benoit nervily lofting the ball into midfield on his right foot and giving it away. Similar to how we deploy our counter-press, like I've spoken about in previous episodes, Spurs' objective is to press high, force turnovers, regain the ball, and then counter-attack against depleted numbers with this 5 and especially down the wings. In this game, they were able to do this particularly well early on, with them forcing Cucurella to slip over 2 times and getting an early 2-goal lead from these 2 mistakes. And though it was clear that Cucurella was wearing the wrong footwear somehow, I'm not sure how that confusion happened, it was this early pressure that Spurs put us under that forced those 2 slips, and I was able to get them into the game in the first place. This 2-goal lead, of course, coming by way of Dejan Kulusevski, but also ex-Chelsea boy Dominic Solanke. And the latter was a big beneficiary of this early game plan, as Spurs were able to hit Solanke once they won the ball back, and with either short passes to his feet or with long balls from the back line, and use his frame to play off of, with his excellent hold-up play initially proving too much to handle for the aforementioned Benoit Badiashile, who was having to mark him, and Levi Colwill too. Spurs were deploying the high press and forcing us to win individual battles like this Solanke versus Badiashile one, because they believed they could beat us in those duels. Now, I know a lot of people are going to talk about Marc Cucurella and his position in the second half, and don't worry, I will too, but actually this is the secret to how we won. We were winning the individual battles in midfield from the starting whistle, and even despite Tottenham getting those 2 goals early on and having another couple of chances go begging, Chelsea largely looked the better side throughout the half, with our 5-5 setup being slightly different to Spurs and allowing us to play through the intense pressure that they were putting us under. So let's talk about those key discrepancies. Despite us both having 5 in attack and 5 in defence, the shape of the teams are fundamentally different. Whilst Tottenham deploy this 4-1 and then 2-3 shape, we are in a 3-2 and then a 2-3 shape. But why is this important? Well, it's due to something that I've mentioned in earlier episodes that is a key component to how this Enzo Maresca Chelsea team operates: our box midfield. Our box midfield usually allows us to get a 4v3 advantage in the midfield, and despite us matching up 5v5 all over the pitch, we were still able to do this versus Tottenham because of how they deployed their 5s. If we look at the 2 back lines, it starts to become a bit clearer. Tottenham's defence consists of a back 4 with a lone player in the central defensive midfield role, whereas Chelsea's is a back 3 with 2 players in this holding midfield role. Now this is rather intricate, but because our back 3 occupies the same space as their back 4, we are able to commit an extra body into the midfield. Obviously we have 2 here, they only have 1 with Bissouma, and Caicedo, as he inverts from the right back role, is the one to be this spare man. And though this seems equal at first, with Kulusevski and Sarr matching up 1-to-1 with Lavia, it's slightly further forward where we see this man advantage accrue. Their back 5 is occupied by our front 5, like we saw in our defensive third, but the distribution of players is different and it allows us to find space in different areas. Our wingers are always tasked with staying out wide and creating 1v1s out wide against the fullback. So Destiny Udogie over here with Neto and Pedro Porro over here with Sancho are both occupied by their opposite numbers. Nicholas Jackson will be the one that roams around in the central area, and he'll occupy both Mickey van der Ven and Romero, who eventually goes off in the end. And now this midfield advantage starts to become clear. It's a 2v1 in the pocket in front of the back 4 with Bissouma up against Enzo and Palmer. So what ends up happening is that if we are able to win these individual battles in midfield and bypass this second line of the Tottenham press with Kulusevski and Sarr, with Caicedo for example getting it into Enzo, then we get the spare man here and we're able to progress the ball up the pitch from this area. And that leads us obviously into attacking with our 5 versus their 5. Now, Cole Palmer will rightfully get a lot of credit for his role in this game, and his 2 penalties, of course, being the goals that won us the match. But it's actually the stars of the show were Lavia and Caicedo, who were not only able to beat the press, but progressed the ball to the spare man, who was Enzo Fernandez, in this role, as Bissouma was tasked with man-marking Palmer for the majority of the game, and we've seen that a lot this season with Palmer being man-marked out of games. But what this did is it left the Argentine free in this hole, and he kept receiving the ball from deep, and he was able to progress us forward from there. Once the ball is with Enzo here, he has 3 options. He can obviously just run up the pitch and shoot from the edge of the box, which he doesn't often do. He can play this ball into Jackson, who might like to make runs off of the centre-backs, and obviously he can be found that way. Or the third option, and the one which we took the most of the time, is spreading it out wide to Neto or Sancho on these wings and allowing them to duel in their 1v1s, because that's what we thrive on, and that's where we kind of expect our success to come from. And that third option is what allows us to get back into the game, really, with Jadon Sancho being able to receive the ball from admittedly Cucurella and not Enzo in this instance, as players are kind of swapped around and we'd navigated the press, and he starts running at Pedro Porro. Now, Enzo and Jackson play a big role here too, as the latter is, as mentioned before, not only occupying Mickey van der Ven, who has to watch him from behind, but also Radu Dragusin, who had come on for Romero at this point. So when Sancho starts running down the wing at Pedro Porro and Enzo makes this bombing run into the box from this deeper position, Dragusin has to make this late reaction to follow Enzo or he will be free, and with this extra space now, with Jackson obviously dragging Mickey van der Ven away, Sancho is able to quite easily just drift infield and get a shot from outside the box, which bends into the far corner with an absolutely sublime finish. Now, we went into the break 1 goal down, but it always felt as if Chelsea were going to get back into the game, with fans and pundits alike still predicting Chelsea to win because of how well we played in that first half besides the opening 10 minutes. And though Lavia was a large part of our success in the first half with his press resistance and his line-breaking passes from this left midfield role, and his ability being key to how we bypassed the Spurs press, the game largely followed the same pattern with him on the bench. But this time, Chelsea had more balance because we no longer had a left footer on the right side. Instead, we had him on the left-hand side over here where he could comfortably play passes down the line. And Malo Gusto, of course, on this right-hand side could comfortably play the ball down the line on his right foot. Now, this is something I've suggested that we do in the past with this setup, with Gusto playing as this right centre-back, because he has been doing the inverting that we've seen, and he just simply isn't as good at it as Marc Cucurella is. And obviously now this provides us with a left footer in midfield as well, which gives us a little bit extra balance here too. Now, we'll talk about Marc Cucurella's position because it is a major talking point. We've seen Malo Gusto do this same thing on the opposite side, but quite frankly, as I said, Cucurella is just better at this role, and he now becomes a roaming midfielder in the left half space. He doesn't stay back here in this holding role. He goes into this half space, this half channel down the line, and he just goes anywhere between here. He can go back and help defend. He can come into midfield to help play passes up to Sancho. He can interchange with Enzo and go into this 10, which is what he does for the majority of this half, and he can even make the over or underlapping runs as he interchanges with Sancho on this left hand side. His position is very, very versatile, and it's really hard for the Tottenham defence to pick up. And what we kind of see for the majority of this half is Enzo being in this deeper role, being this deep lying playmaker and able to get the ball up to Sancho or play it through the lines to Palmer as we make that man advantage. But also we see Cucurella just being an absolute nuisance because not only can he go out wide and become this option when Sancho drifts in field like we saw him do in the first half and occupy Porro, but he can also get into the box from this position and cause loads of issues because the Tottenham players don't really know who's marking Cucurella because he's a left back in the inside 10. They don't really expect a left back to be in this position, so for the majority of the time he's just kind of ignored, and he's easily able to find space in the first half early on, being found in the box by Sancho within the first 3 minutes of the half and providing the Englishman with an opportunity to shoot with a 1-2, which Fraser Forster nicely saves. Now, all the players in our midfield from Enzo, Cucurella, Sancho, Caicedo and Palmer, they would be interchanging all game and being really hard to pick up, and we get to see this rotation really pay benefits as we eventually see Caicedo actually end up in this role as Cucurella drops a bit deeper and Enzo moves over to this right hand side. And him bursting into the box as Cucurella drops back from his advanced position is actually what allows us to get one of our penalties, because he drives into the box and Bissouma, who has followed him, fouls him in the box, and it's a blatant penalty, and even Bissouma looks to the heavens and kind of says, why have I done that? He knows it's a penalty. Anthony Taylor points to the spot, thankfully, and of course Cole Palmer, of all players, he will step up to the plate and he obviously will score with a cold finish, which helps Chelsea equalise from the spot. Chelsea are well on top at this point, and it felt like just a matter of time before we went ahead, and we do that just over 10 minutes later. Spurs ultimately are the makers of their own downfall as they fail to mark Palmer on this right hand side as he comes into the wing, as Destiny Udogie has once again gone out to Neto to challenge him, and Neto on this right hand side just simply plays it through and around to Cole Palmer, who comes into this side. He does some excellent trickery to get into the box and fool not only Udogie but someone else as well, get it across the box to Enzo Fernandez, who has actually come up into this role and is free because Cucurella has moved centrally and occupied Bissouma, so he can't actually mark Enzo, and Enzo's free on the edge of the box to receive this ball from Palmer, despite a little bit of a deflection, and absolutely bullet in a left-footed volley to get us ahead and go 3-2 up. And we get another penalty late on after Sarr fouls Palmer in the box here as he's running away from the box, which is a very silly foul to give away, and even he knows it. Again, he knows it's a foul. Palmer from the spot, of course, does a very icy cool Panenka penalty, wrapping up a cool, calm and collected performance from Enzo Maresca's blue and white army. And though Spurs get a late consolation from who else but Heung-min Son after a corner, it wasn't enough to spark a comeback for the home side, and Chelsea went home the victors. Chelsea move on to more Conference League action in midweek as we take on Astana, and I'll of course be live streaming on this channel my pre-match thoughts, predictions, and my lineup reactions before the match. But if you want something else to watch until then, perhaps check out one of these 2 videos on screen in the meantime. Thank you guys so much for watching as ever, and remember, in the rain or in the dry, keep that blue flag flying high. Come on, you Blues.